Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, and, well, your favorite new late-night talk show host. Is that what I am? It just warms my cockles to be so egomaniacal at the beginning of the show. But yeah, here we are on the Midnighter, episode 16. Still doing the show. I like these late night shows. Last night's show, Mike Alito, what a great show that was last night. If I do say so myself, I can't thank him enough for coming on the show. Lot to think about. Of course, not a day goes by. Rita Moreno has now is on the receiving end of all of the ire for coming out and defending Lin-Manuel Miranda, who produced, full disclosure, her latest documentary. You know, what I find so interesting is Rita Moreno, a woman that's been working for close to, well, I guess 60 years now. I mean, when was West Side Story? 60? I mean, more than 60 years. I mean, how long? She was on Oz. You know, it's what a career she's had. And yet pilloried and destroyed on social media because of her opinion. I don't know. What do you have to do to earn anyone's respect in this business? It's or in this world anymore. Does anybody respect anybody else? I don't know. But on that same line of last night's conversation, you know, what I found interesting is I found myself on this on the receiving end of this today, because I am a middle-aged white cis male. I am finding that my own opinions are increasingly marginalized. That I'm literally, people actively just say, we don't want to hear from you. You know, we don't, which I find so strange because, you know, it's not like, I don't know. I mean, I've been pursuing my own career. I've done certain things, you know, I have certain things to say, but I find it interesting that look, anyone who's done any research into how civilizations or societies fall into things like fascism, the very first, the fascism playbook begins with finding somebody you can dehumanize. I mean, that's what happened in Germany, you know, to the Jews. Me being one of them, I wasn't in Germany, but I'm a Jew. And my whole life, because I don't look like a Jew, because I was adopted into a Jewish family, I mean, I've heard it all. Oh, you're not really Jewish. No, really? All those years in Sunday school and learning Hebrew and being bar mitzvahed, my family's foundation, building a synagogue, none of that matters. Yeah, because you're not really Jewish. I mean, it's such a weird thing that people have dehumanized. You dehumanize human beings, and that is the first step always to a society that once you have a group of people that you can dehumanize, you can put all of your problems on, that's when it begins. And what I find really interesting is now, not just white cis males like myself, but there are groups of people that if you don't think right now, there are other groups of people in this society, in American society, that will come after you if you don't think the way they think. And they're supposed to be the progressive ones. It's very interesting to watch. I mean, I've always considered myself to be a progressive person. I've had LGBTQ friends my whole life. I've always said jokingly that I'm gay adjacent, and I haven't had a problem with that. You know, I've had gay friends, all different kinds of the spectrum of different people's sexuality since I was 13. I've reveled in that. It's never become a thing for me. It was just what it just was. Never really thought about it. You know, I just because working in the arts and having people in the Seattle film community had a large gay population, people that ran the film festivals there, that went to screenings, ran theaters, just people I knew. Did it matter to me? No. As a matter of fact, it really didn't come up. Not much, although I did go to gay bars and did go to gay clubs and parties. Never an issue for me. But it's now I find as I'm older, I'm being pigeonholed and labeled, which is such a strange thing for me considering the kind of people that I grew up with. But so there was an interesting article today in the Hollywood Reporter that I had to read. I had to share with you today because, I don't get overtly political on Robservations, or I just but these are social issues that I find fascinating. So I want to read this article. It's by Hilton Dresden, and it was published today at 11 a.m. in the Hollywood Reporter. Why it's time for all award shows to ditch the binary acting categories. And Hilton Dresden wrote this. Best Actress, Best Actor. These are the labels generations of starry-eyed performers have dreamed of claiming. But what if neither of those is actually capable of describing who you really are? What if both cause an uncomfortable twinge in your stomach because they neglect to consider the full scope of who an artist can be? We're talking, of course, about being non-binary within the long-standing binary of Hollywood. Other spheres of our culture don't divide their top honors into gendered categories. There isn't a Nobel Prize for Best Female Peacemaker, nor a James Beard Award for Best Male Chef. So why are the Oscars split male-female? We're familiar at this juncture with the conversations around the need for more diversity on screen in regards to race, sexuality, disability, etc. What's more uncertain is the dialogue surrounding portrayals of non-binary people. Obviously, we need to see more trans men and women represented in our media. But even if they fit neatly into the Hollywood award system, either as an actor or an actress. But what about those who identify as neither or both? A quick vocabulary lesson. Non-binary, according to GLAAD, is a term used by some people who experience their gender identity and or gender expression as a falling outside the categories of man and woman. They may define their gender as falling somewhere in between man and women, or may define it as wholly different from these terms. There are a whole host of other words created to help categorize different lived experiences. Genderqueer, agender, gender fluid. Different words work for different people, and each contains its own nuance. I personally use trans non-binary. So does B. Scott, recently announced as the first of that label to host a show on BET 20s After the Show out this fall. They describe their identity as someone whose gender identity is different from the sex they were assigned at birth. That's the trans part. And also a gender identity that isn't characterized exclusively as man or woman. That's the non-binary part. But plain old non-binary has emerged as a front-runner term. And basically a bunch of us don't feel comfortable being defined as strictly male or female. What words and pronouns we identify with can and do change. Comedian and actor Cole Escola, Search Party, Difficult People, recently came out as non-binary. They describe identifying with the word as more of a clarification for how I've always felt and operated. I just looked up and saw that there was this other pronoun that better suited how I've always felt. I'll be the first to admit it sometimes feels clunky to be throwing around all of these different terms. Using the term they, them is confusing for my mom, who can't get over the implied plurality of it. Good point. I understand the linguistics behind that confusion, though it still hurts to be misgendered. Escola offers, I even feel unsure about really sinking my claws into the term non-binary and they, them pronouns because it feels like it's ironic to be like, I don't want any labels, so here's this label. In an ideal world, pronouns would be irrelevant and everyone would be able to just be an individual person. But the reality is, labels do matter because we live in a cisgender, someone who does not feel trans or binary society, and to ignore labels is to ignore who someone fundamentally is, to show you don't care enough to respect how someone wishes to be perceived. It feels like non-binary is having a 2021 moment. The latest big name to identify is pop star Demi Lovato. As they tell the Hollywood Reporter, when I overdosed in 2018, I feel strongly that the reason that happened was because I was ignoring my truth. I suppressed who I really was to fit this sexy, feminine pop star and actress image that others had assigned for me, be it stylists, team members, or even fans, that I never truly identified with. Now, I just realized that it's so much more important to live your truth than to ever suppress yourself, because that's the type of stuff that happens when you do. Many other notable actors use that descriptor. Sarah Ramirez will play a non-binary character on the Sex and the City reboot. Other non-binary people in Hollywood include Shrill's ER Fightmaster, Younger's Nico Tortorella, and Billions' Asia Kate Dillon. Some play non-binary characters, some play cis characters, and Billy Porter will portray a genderless fairy godparent in the new Cinderella. And sharp-eyed fans of Loki recently discovered that in the new TV series, his sex is noted as fluid. In a welcome sign, USA Today reports that the Biden administration has suggested it's considering adding an X gender option on federal documents. On the other side, according to HRC, in 2021 alone, over 250 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced to state legislatures. Yet non-binary is far from new. Alok Vade Menon, author of Beyond the Gender Binary in 2020, that was written in 2020, is a gender non-conforming writer, performer, and scholar. There's a long and prolific history of people who have lived and thrived outside Western gender binary system for thousands of years in indigenous cultures across the world, whether that look like the Mux people, now Mexico, or the Fafafine people of Samoa, or the Bakla people in the Philippines, or the Hijira people in India. Vade Menon explains. What we see is, with European colonization, there's the imposition of cross-dressing laws that made it illegal for people to exist in public and banned their cultural art forms and rituals and ceremonies, and forcibly assimilated people into the Western gender binary. Knowing this history is crucial, Vade Menon emphasizes. We see this mistaken paradigm that non-binary and gender non-conforming people are new, when in fact we've been here for a very long time. What is new is the imposition of Western gender norms. Non-binary people are not only an ancient culture in other parts of the world, but right on our very own soil. Beyond the effacement of the beautiful genderless traditions of the Native American peoples, Vade Menon says, in the late 19th century, the most visible members of the queer community in the U.S. were visibly gender non-conforming people who we would understand as non-binary today. That history has been scrubbed away by cis colonizers, and Hollywood could not be more complicit in that erasure. The Hays Code, introduced in 1930 and abolished in 1968, demanded strict moral guidelines for films. What if we move the onus away from us being visible toward them concealing us, Vade Menon muses. That's a more interesting history for me. Is there a cost to an actor's career if they come out as non-binary today? On one hand, you're making yourself an extremely desirable candidate for, say, the single non-binary role in need of casting at any given moment. On the other, you're potentially pigeonholing yourself, especially if a casting agent is transphobic. Because of that, writing characters for oneself can birth much-needed opportunities. I've always created otherly gendered roles for myself, females mostly, says Escola, who writes and plays female parts in comedy videos like Mom Commercial. Comedian Mae Martin also pens their own parts. The co-writer and star of the British series Feel Good came out as non-binary on April 14th. Martin was then nominated for a BAFTA Award for Best Female Comedy Performance, though their character similarly does not identify as a woman. Speaking with The Hollywood Reporter, Martin explains, I never want my discomfort to overshadow my gratitude, but yes, it did feel inaccurate to be in a female category and bumped. As a non-binary person, bumped is British slang for excluded. Maybe I worried that if I was too outspoken about it, I wouldn't be included at all, which is crazy. While there have been calls for the addition of a third gender category to award shows, the concept is limiting. Argues Scott, the merit of your work, no matter how great it is, would not be able to truly be compared to everyone. I do believe that the only way to fix it is to just have one category. That's what the MTV Movie and TV Awards did, moving to gender-neutral categories in 2017. Gender-neutral categories. And the Grammys, which scrapped gender categories a decade ago. As more people eschew binary gender in favor of freedom, it's definitely time for other awards bodies to follow suit. Of course, it will mean shifting language around identity on a mass scale moving forward, but that's okay. We're all evolving, and since all of us are, it's definitely time for the Academy to do so as well. Want to fight the tides of change? Then why not pick another arbitrary division of nominees? How about age categories? Is that really so different from boys versus girls? Then non-binary folks don't have to worry about being misgendered on the greatest night of their acting careers. And when I write my starring vehicle, I can win for Best Actor in the 20-something category the same year Glenn Close wins for Sunset Boulevard. Because ultimately, identifying as non-binary is about being respected and seen. Says Lovato, We must keep having these conversations about gender with an open heart and an open mind so that we can together figure out how to become a more united species on this planet. So I read that and I thought that was pretty interesting because ultimately I am, as many people, if you followed me for any length of time, I would hope you would understand that I am a person that is interested in the individual. Who are you as a person? I don't care what tribe you belong to. I don't care how you identify. And I believe people should be able to identify however they want. And I am willing and able to absolutely adhere to, if somebody tells me that they would like to be identified a certain way, they want me to use specific pronouns or refer to them in a proper way, I would say absolutely. Whatever you want me to do, whatever makes you feel most comfortable. Because I'm most interested in the fact that every individual is an individual. And I think that's important. What I do see with all this kind of talk, though, it is hard not to sit there and say, well, so we're creating another tribe, another team. And when people talk about their individuality and they want to be referred to in a certain way, I think great. I think it's fantastic. You do you. And I'm willing to represent or however you want me to think of you and speak with you and address you, I am happy to do so. I'm happy to do so. As a matter of fact, I would insist upon it. One of the things that I talk about in this show all the time is the fact that there's only one of each one of us in the entire infinitude of the cosmos. There's only one. We're the rarest commodity in all of creation, us, human beings. And yet we're so quick to besmirch, deny, destroy, ridicule, disrespect, whatever, one another, which seems so silly to me. Because I think that, I, at least in my life, have tried to, on a personal level, respect most of the people that I meet. Orville Nation sends in a fist bump, a super chat sticker. Thank you, Orville Nation. But I've always believed that. And I think anybody should be addressed or referred to or interacted with the way they want to be interacted with. But it does seem to me that even that is giving way to tribalism. And, these tribes that we're having, if you read these articles, there is this odd idea about, look, history is history. And our human history is a charnel house. It is a churning litany of horrors that human beings have visited upon one another. And you go back far enough, you're going to go where you want. But this idea that our history is somehow bad, I mean, in terms of, it's all bad, really. But that our history is something that we want to deny. Our history did get us to where we are now. Despite all the injustice, despite all the horrors that were visited upon human beings by other human beings, there was a lot of good that came out of our history as well. And I sometimes feel that, the incredible struggle the human race has gone through for thousands and thousands of years now is sort of being, I don't know. I mean, we did get here. And things are always getting better for us, especially in the last 100 years. Now, as long as we can stop our climate catastrophe and the loss of the biodiversity of the planet. See, what I think is really important is we really need to start taking care of this planet of ours, which we're not doing a very good job of. But in terms of individuals, I have no problem with anyone who wants to be referred to however they want to be referred to. I am a firm believer in the individual. As a matter of fact, Western civilization that is constantly being besmirched now is designed, the very thing it's designed to do is support the individual. That's what our Western civilization is all about. Now, do we have a long way to go to represent all individuals? Absolutely. But the thing that Western civilization is best at, one of the things it's here to do, is to make sure, I think a bug flew in my mouth, is to make sure that each one of us has the rights and ability to live the life that we want to live. That's what I like about living in the West. That's what I like about living now. There's more opportunity for the individual to be an individual than probably any other time in human history. And I just want, for everybody, as we're seeking out new ways of thinking about one another and addressing one another and thinking about ourselves, I don't want anyone to forget that we live in a pretty damn fantastic time. Can it be better? Sure. But we live in a time where the individual is allowed to grow and flourish. And that is something to be protected and honored for everybody. And I think, that's what I was thinking about today. I don't know what you guys were all thinking about, but that's what I was thinking about. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do, as you all know. One of the fun things about the show is bringing people on. Last night, what an incredible conversation we had last night. I really love that. So if anyone's out there and you choose to come on to the show, if I haven't seen you before, if I've never seen you before, come on in. If I have seen you before, I'd ask hang back, see if somebody you haven't met or don't know, see if they'll come on, and let's see if we can have ourselves a party like last night. What a great conversation that was. And you know what? I'm going to see if we have any letters. I'm not sure if I have any Midnighter letters, but perhaps I do. Well, doesn't look like I do. But you never know what can happen now. We'll see. We'll see who's out there. Yeah, I don't know why. No letters to the Midnighter. I guess no one wants to write letters to me. We did get a letter for whining about movies, though, which is pretty fun. Well, that's good. They liked another round. Oh, wait. The Midnighter. I do have a letter. I might have already read this, though. Yeah, I think I did read this. This is a great letter, though, even though I'd already read it. About rock and roll. So we'll see. But this letter for rock and roll was a really interesting letter. I don't know if you guys remember it. Benjamin Del Manto wrote it about how rock has lost its potency for our culture. And I thought, I've been thinking about this letter, and I'm like, is he right? I don't know. So, anyway, we'll see. I don't know. Is anyone out there? Is there anybody out there? I don't know if there's anybody out there. No one's taking the bait. No one's jumping in. We'll see. Luffy is God says, good for you, Rob. I'm a firm believer that we were given a birth name for a reason, and that is how, Sonny Dominguez is here. I'm going to bring Sonny Dominguez on. Hello, Sonny. Oh, you can you hear me? Well, let's bring you on, sir. Are you ready to join the midnight at the Oasis, as we like to say, if you remember that song from the 70s? Not many people do, but that's okay. You don't have to. I'm bringing you on and putting you in, coach. You're going to be on the show. We're going to have a conversation, Sonny. So first of all, let me just adjust you on the screen. Please welcome Sonny Dominguez to Midnighter. Hello, Sonny.
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Finally, first off, why don't you tell everybody where you're at right now?
I'm down the street from you in Burbank, California.
I knew that already.
Yeah.
So how are things? How's the Batman statue?
Batman statue.
You know, the one in Burbank that's in front of the AMC 16.
The AMC? Yeah, it's great. It's, keeping vigil of the mean streets of Burbank, because it can get kind of rowdy out here.
I know, right? I mean, Now, have you been back to the theaters again?
Oh, yeah. I go to the theaters every week with the movie pass and all
Have you seen, is AMC A-List still working? Do you go to the AMC 16?
Oh, yeah. And I want to, actually, there's one movie I wanted to talk to you about because I wrote in about it, New Order.
I've got a great review from our fan. So you went and saw New Order.
Yeah, and I was...
First of all, did you know anything about it before you went in?
Not really. I saw the trailer briefly, and I go, you know what? I probably can't see that when I'm in a good mood. I need to just wait to when I'm in a pensive mood to go see it. Yeah.
I would love to hear. First of all, tell everybody at home what New Order's about.
Well, it's kind of hard to really explain, but it's basically how the lower class, more browner-looking people in Mexico were rising up against the higher class, who are more white-looking people. And let's just say the revolution goes a certain way, and then I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but because I really encourage people to watch it, because you go, okay, and then just the depravity of man, the rawness of human nature, and people just kind of losing their minds and going into that tribalistic destruction.
Yep.
No logic.
Nope.
And when you try to do good, it backfires, and just all this rolling ball. And yeah,
were you shocked by it?
Yes, I hated. I was feeling all these emotions: hate, anger, wrath. But I was loving it because I don't ever experience that. Maybe I don't watch enough movies, but these emotions are things that I don't really go to the movies to experience. I experience joy, laughter, encouragement. Maybe it's just some depressing, dramatic movies, but this movie, as the kids say, shook me in a way that I was like,
yep.
And it was funny. A younger girl in her 20s, after the movie is over, she just goes, "What the hell did I just watch?" And she said it out loud, and I'm just like, yes, I was kind of thinking the same thing, and I've been concerned about the current trajectory of our culture right now. I know you talked about cancel culture.
Me too.
There's a girl who did a video, a black girl. She says it's call out culture, where it's a trying to get other people in trouble so people can't see what you're doing.
Right.
So the focus is on you. Let's focus on somebody else, because look how bad they are, so you can't see all the skeletons in my closet.
What aboutism? What about that person?
Yeah.
No, I think it's really awful.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting about the whole thing is that people have now taken it upon themselves to take this position that they know best.
Right.
And they are you go back to, you're familiar with the Bible, as I know, Scripture.
Yeah.
Before he who is without sin, the idea that if you're without sin, go ahead. If you don't have any sin in your life, you can throw the stones. Go right ahead and do that. Well, it's so interesting to me that I feel that nowadays, calling people out, call out culture. My question for that is why are you doing this? Why do you believe that you are in a position where you can call somebody else out for their perceived bad behavior? Who made you? I mean, our civilization, again, Western civilization, our legal system believes that a jury of your peers, you get a trial, and if you pay your debt to society when you come out of prison or whatever, your debt is paid. Yeah. And I find it so interesting that now not only are we descending into tribalism and this weird groupthink, but people are taking it upon themselves to believe that they somehow have a moral high ground, or they're more enlightened than others, so they're qualified to pass judgment on their fellow human beings. A lot of times they don't even know. They might know some social persona or something that somebody said. And I find myself, there's a lot, it happened to me today that I was like, you're not allowed to have any opinion in this conversation. And I find that shocking.
That happened. I've been told that myself too, because somebody was talking about slavery, and I gave my 2 cents, and they go, "Oh, because you're Latino, you have no, because this is a black thing." And I'm like, do you know that the conquistadors enslaved indigenous, and I'm half and half.
I mean, it's very funny because I think there's a lot of people that don't understand. Like in Rome, the Romans took slaves of everyone.
Yeah.
And I also think that's sort of, again, there is a lack of understanding and a lack of, there's an ignorance coupled with a righteousness that I think is very dangerous.
Exactly.
And I understand when we're discussing slavery in America, it's really one kind of slavery. That's what we're discussing.
Right.
And a horrible thing. You know, it was the slave trade, but slavery was a common practice around the planet for thousands of years. And it's all different kinds of forms of slavery, but right now, I mean, in America, we only have one conversation, and I understand why, because it's our legacy to that was. But like it's, I don't like it when someone tells you that you can't have this conversation. First of all, no one who's having the conversation today are slaves,
right?
At least in America. You know, you might be descendants of slaves. But if you go back far enough, I bet most of the people on the planet are descending from some. It just depends how far back you want to go. 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, 400 years. Where's the cutoff? 1,000 years? You know, it's so interesting to me that how far back do you get to go to call on your oppression? And it's like, is that what you want to do? Like, I believe I'm a futurist. Let's move forward. But if you want to go back into the past that you never were a part of, the legacy you were a part of, absolutely. I mean, last night, Mikey Lito, I don't know if you saw last night's Midnight.
I did, and I really enjoyed it last night.
He was an amazing guest, and he's been a supporter of this channel for a long time, and it was interesting to hear, you know, his perspective. And as he's pointed out, as I've talked about on this show, Black America has never been equal, ever. And there has never been racial equality in this country, and there's been a great injustice done to Black Americans even before they were Americans for over 400 years, almost half a millennia. We're working on half a millennia of injustice to Black America, half a millennia. You know, we're past 400 years now. By the way, the Senate, was it the Senate today? That they passed unanimously that Juneteenth is now an official holiday.
Okay.
I think that's something to be mentioned. The Senate this happened today. Senate unanimously passes a bill making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Amazing. The Senate passed anything. The Senate unanimously passed a resolution on Tuesday establishing June 19th as Juneteenth National Independence Day, a U.S. holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. The legislation has gained momentum since the massive Black Lives Matter protests, sparked by the police killing of George Floyd last year, and the Democrats take over the White House and Congress. But Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson blocked the bill in 2020, saying that the day off for federal employees would cost U.S. taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. Johnson dropped his objection this week, despite his concerns, paving the way for the bill's passage in the Senate. Although I strongly support celebrating emancipation, I objected to the cost and lack of debate. You mean as opposed to, like, say, Columbus Day? Come on, man. So Juneteenth, you know, there we go. I think recognizing these things is only a good thing. But yeah, and I'm all about that. I'm all about, we have to recognize our past. We have to understand where we come from. But it's this very strange tribal judgment, kangaroo courts. I don't know. It's distressing.
Well, one of the things that you talked about even last week and kind of goes into this whole you can't talk. Rock and roll, the rebellious spirit of rock and roll has been lost in almost all our art.
Yeah.
Music, TV, movies. And it's just those people who are just going, you know what, this is how it is right now, but we have a voice and we don't care if you say you can't say, we'll go and we'll do it underground. We'll write what we want to write. We want to paint what we want to paint, and we'll create the art we want to create. And one of the greatest shows of all time, and people say, oh, it can't be made right now. But I say it has to be made right now. We need another All in the Family.
You know what? I couldn't agree more. You know, it's funny when you go back and you watch All in the Family now, especially in this day and age, it's shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up with All in the Family, you know, and we watch it in our house and everything. And Archie Bunker was somebody that everybody knew. Like nowadays, you mention Archie Bunker and people are like, what? You know, nobody remembers, but that show, you go back and you watch that show now, and it's like, oh my God.
And the great thing about that show, it brought people from both sides together to laugh. You know, some people say, well, Archie Bunker was a doofus and all that, racist, racial. Actually, funny enough, I got to have a private meeting for 45 minutes with Norman Lear just because I wrote him a fan letter.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 years ago, I was at the SAG Foundation, and he had come in to speak. And I always attributed the success of Archie Bunker and All the Family to Carol O'Connor, who played Archie Bunker. But then as I'm listening to him speak, I'm like, wait a minute. He based Archie Bunker on his dad, based on an English sitcom from Britain. And so then I got his book on 20 CD tapes, and I burned through it. And after that, I was just so inspired. I go, hey, if there's ever an opportunity to take you to lunch, I'd like to do so. And then I remember the day because I was having a crappy day at work at wait tables. And I got home and I'm going, man, maybe I should just go home, go back to Texas because this is not cutting it. And then I get a letter that says from the office of Norman Lear. And I think, okay, this is just going to be a generic, hey, thanks for the letter, blah, blah. It was, this is my assistant's information. Call her and we'll set up a time to meet.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And that was just me writing a fan letter. I didn't expect to really meet. He's a king of Hollywood. I mean, King Lear, they joke.
Oh no, I mean one of the great talents in television, and yeah, absolutely.
And so when I met with him, I'm nervous, and I tell everybody, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, you're meeting!" And I really didn't understand the scope, what I was getting into, because All in the Family, you know, I know he produced Princess Bride, but then Jefferson, Silver Spoons, you know,
and the Jeffersons were a spinoff from All in the Family.
So is Maude.
Yep.
And Sanford and Son.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I sit down and meet with him, and I could feel like he thought I was going to pitch him something. He goes, so what do you want to talk about? I go, I just wanted to meet you. And he's like, oh, really? That's it? And I'm like, yeah, I just want to ask you a bunch of questions, the stuff that was in his book, and about the current state of comedy. And this is right when Trump was running for president.
And you had read his book. He probably loved that.
Yeah. And I just soaked it in because I just wanted to ask him specifically about the Southern Baptist Convention and he gave me some insight in a private meeting.
Wow.
At one time, he was really friendly until the more conservative right-wing part of the Southern Baptist Convention took over. But he said back in the 70s, before that Jerry Falwell switch over, he had a very friendly communication with the people in the Southern Baptist Convention. Yeah. And then they made him the target, saying he's the responsible for all the evil that's on TV, and because and just some of the stories, like people left pig's head on his front lawn, and it's like, wow, but the reason what I came out of that meeting with was two things. One was, I said, Mr. Lear, I'm more conservative. I grew up that way. I do think, and I have learned, especially in 80s and 90s sitcoms, a lot of liberal teachings that I think going on with I went to a private Christian school and then was a religion major at Baylor. They kind of were in sync together, the humanism and then the spirituality and then the understanding. Yeah. And so I asked him, hey, I don't see anything like that right now. And he says, why don't you just write it? And I'm just like, because I didn't think of that.
Now, how long did that conversation go on for?
45 minutes in his
Wow.
office. Yeah. And
that was amazing that he gave you that time of day.
And not only that, he goes, he asked me what kind of actor I wanted to be, and he asked me one of my favorite shows was, I said, Dick Van Dyke, because he didn't always have to be the funny man. He always was able to let somebody else have the spotlight every once in a while.
Was he surprised? Was Lear surprised that you knew all these shows?
I'm not sure. I think in some aspects he did, because he goes, so where do you watch my stuff? I go, Nick at Night, TV Land, DVDs. And my grandpa was a mixture between Archie Bunker meets Fred Mertz, but Latino. I mean, because he was cranky, he was cheap, but he had that heart of gold, and no matter, even if he said comments that were somewhat racially on PC, he wasn't a racist, and neither was Archie Bunker. Like when Archie Bunker accidentally went into the meeting of the Ku Klux Klan, he's like, "What am I supposed to be doing here? Like, I'm not. What? Uh-oh. Like, I might make some comments about people, but this is too far for even."
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I feel that our society has become. By the way, the Mad Genius has joined us, but I can hear the Mad Genius, but I can't see the Mad Genius, so I don't know if I can bring the Mad Genius on with us, but we'll continue to talk. Mad Genius, if you're there. If not, that's a hello. I can't see you. I can't see your camera. You're looking very outer limits. But I'll go ahead and fix it, and we'll see what happens. But let me ask you this: I feel that our pop culture, and maybe our culture has become sort of less. We have. I feel like we might have been a little bit smarter than in the 70s. I feel like we've really reverted, that we have forgotten about our humanity in a way. That I think that everybody wants everything to be this hermetically sealed kumbaya. Oh, I don't want to be offended, and we're moving into this world where, especially the idea of like the article I read about, if you want to be considered non-binary and use these pronouns, I feel that while that's fine, the people that are asking this, they are asking a lot. They're asking, all of a sudden they're saying, I want all of civilization as it's existed for the last, developing over the last thousands of years. We're going to have it all change in a month, and you're going to do exactly exactly what I want you to do, so I can get the world that I want right now. And I it's so strange to me, where I always thought that we were in the midst of a evolutionary change that is constantly ongoing, and it's been happening, and it was working. And I like last night when I was talking to Mikey Lito, talking about, for instance, same-sex marriage. How over the last 25 years, this is something that a lot of my gay friends said, this is never going to happen. 25 years later, it's the law of the land. We are in the midst of this kind of societal change, because ultimately I think that Western civilization and its respect of the individual, the natural evolution of what our society is that we will evolve into respecting all peoples and all their individuality. That's what we were built to do. That's what Western civilization is, the very basis of it is. And yet I feel like, well, no, let's attack this, and let's, because I have to stomp my feet right now, and I want what I want right now, without any understanding that this is a process. There's an evolutionary process and if you want to look back, the 20th century, I mean, what a horrible century for humankind, but there has been social evolution, there's been physical evolution, the life expectancy, we went up 30 years from 1900 to 2000, and that more people,
technology,
everything. We're on an upward curve on every, other than the planet itself, which we need to fix. But for humanity, it has been on an upward trajectory until I feel recently.
Well, I think.
Go ahead.
So I think one of the aspects is we have all these methods of how to communicate with people, but we're become horrible communicators.
I completely agree.
We no longer want to have courageous conversations about saying, hey, like there's sometimes I'll put something on my Facebook or saying, hey, let's look at this, and people immediately will want to just say one side or the other and say discredit it or dismiss it. I'm like, I'm just asking questions.
Right.
Isn't that what scientists do? Isn't that what people who want to learn go, hey, guys, this thing happened. I'm curious about that. Give me your feedback. But they just want to just say, no, we don't want to discuss it. Shut up. Be quiet.
I was told that today.
Yeah.
I was told that today. And I was told that by somebody who I'd actually read their book.
Wow.
And it's, wow, Emil Johansson is here, and he got a haircut. Just like I did. I'm going to bring Emil all the way from Sweden into the conversation. Awesome. And wow, only because, I mean, Emil, come on, man, that haircut's dope, son. Nicely done. Getting rid of the COVID hair. I did the same thing. And it was outstanding. I feel like a new man. Of course, my hair's got no gel in it. Where you look like you got product. You look good. So let's bring Emil Johansson all the way in from Sweden. Join me and Sonny Dominguez. Emil, welcome to the Midnighter. How are you all the way from Sweden? How are things? It's your morning. How are things there?
Yeah, it's 9:46 for me in the morning. I just watched Loki and it was awesome. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it was great.
Oh, you watched episode 2?
Yeah.
Nice. See, you guys, you're all lucky you can get it. Sonny, did you see the first episode of Loki?
Loved it. I think it's going to be one of the top 10 sci-fi shows of all time.
I loved it too. I mean,
yeah,
I thought it was great.
I think just the interaction and the banter between Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston.
Oh, it's great.
Like, I want to see 7 seasons of that. I doubt we're going to get that, but it's just like that. Wow, this is smooth.
I think so. I think so too. By the way, there's a couple of people sending in some tips and things. James Lockman says, he sends in a nice super chat and says, "Aloha, Rob. Have you seen that Sideshow has unveiled a Toshiro Mifune figure? It's actually a statue that I've been dying for them to release. They got my $370. So far, I've only bought Star Wars, 3 Darth Mauls, and a Boba Fett, and Han Frozen and Carbonite." James, I cannot tell a lie. I might have pre-ordered that Toshiro Mifune statue, and him as a samurai, and it's awesome. Love it. Darth Plato sends in a tip and says, "Juneteenth Day is not the end of slavery. It's a scheme to replace the 4th of July. The end of slavery was not a single-day event. The northern states ended it by 1800. In the South, it ended when the Union Army passed through the various states." Well, I haven't. Darth Plato says, "Let's wait and see the degree of resistance we get as we get closer to the 4th of July." Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that the Independence Day is when the United States was, liberated from the British. I don't see as Juneteenth would encroach on that. I think both can exist, but like you said, I guess we'll see. But yes, I think it's commemorating the whole idea of slavery ending. But it wasn't it in Texas or something. But yes, I think I could make an argument that certain elements of slavery have never ended in the United States. Certain things. But that's a larger conversation to have. But back to Loki.
Yeah.
So you guys, Sonny, you loved it. Emil, you loved it too. What did you guys love about it?
I liked that it was not. I didn't expect it to be what it was. I really like Owen Wilson and his banter with Loki, but I just it's like nihilism or something. Is that the right word? It's like you get almost depressed because they have the biggest power in the universe, but they're working in an office or something.
Right.
I just think there's something really, really fascinating about that show. I don't know exactly what it is about it I like, but I really like it.
What about you, Sonny?
Again, like Emil said, and just the charm, and also how when Loki was brought to the future that was going to be his future, and his realization of wow, and how he was overcome with all those emotions, seeing his mother, his father, his brother, and just his end. And how now I want to go, wait, what's he gonna? Something's clicking in his head. It's how am I gonna prevent that from happening?
I mean, I have to tell you, I thought that was a pretty powerful. I mean, you kind of know it's coming once you see the tape of his life, and Owen Wilson's, he's gonna see it. But it was, I thought it was really poignant. And what I find really interesting too is that, when you watch things, I think it's important to take them as they are and as they're intended. And I think that Loki, it calls back, first of all, Simonson's run on Thor in the 80s, but it calls back movies like Brazil and the Adjustment Bureau, and the whole idea of the Time Variance Authority is so outlandish. I can't believe that they even delved into it in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But ultimately, it's still what I love about the MCU is they never shy away from the comic book origins of their universe. You know, they'll delve right into it. They'll jump right in, and they're like, what can we take from our comic book universe and incorporate? I mean, obviously we're gonna have to change it around so we make it work, but they look at their source material, which to me is exactly what they should be doing. Go figure. I mean, whereas Lucasfilm, you know, to me, what I do not understand that these larger franchise properties, Lucasfilm had all of these books, the post Return of the Jedi world. They had all of these books, all of these characters, and for the sequel trilogy, they could have delved into those, but they didn't. Filoni is making a judicious use of all of that. They're incorporating Grand Admiral Thrawn, you know, which was created in a book series in the early 90s. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but the new animated Star Trek series, Star Trek Prodigy, took a character from Peter David's New Frontier novels that is not canonical, but there's a species that they've now made a character out of. Now, I hope Peter David gets credit and gets some cash because he did create these. I know they don't have to pay him because CBS owns all that stuff, but still leave it to a show that has David Mack, my favorite Star Trek novelist right now, him and Christopher Bennett, working on the show. But I just don't understand why the Predator, Predator and Alien have amazing Dark Horse comic series, ripe for adaptation. I'm sure no one even knows. But it just drives me crazy that here's all this material, but Marvel, they're like, gosh, we've got decades of story material. What can we delve into now? And the Time Variance Authority was, in fact, created in the pages of Thor. So, of course, we're going to use that. And I thought that's a great way to go. And I think they're doing a great job.
I still don't. Oh, you can.
No, please go ahead.
I don't understand how, because like I didn't grow up reading comics, I don't know all of these references, but like it seems very outlandish. Certain things that happen, like they're in space and they're gods and they're everything that happens, but it still works somehow. Like you believe it somehow, and I don't know how that's possible, but it's great.
Well, you just pinpointed the one thing when they first started the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's what I asked myself. After seeing Iron Man 1, which is if you go back and you watch Iron Man 1, it's almost quaint in how small it is and intimate it is. It's one man dealing with his issues. And, you know, at the end, he battles Jeff Bridges, who's in another suit, who stole his technology. And then you go fast forward to Thanos. It's just insane. And I was like, how are they going to make people, I liked Iron Man 1 a great deal. And when I saw it, I'm like, how are they going to incorporate Thor into the universe that they've established in Iron Man 1? How's that going to work? And how are they going to have Steve Rogers? Like, are they going to go back and go to World War II? And lo and behold, they did. And every time they've added a new building block to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like, look, do I think it's the end all? Is it The Godfather? No. But it's based on Marvel comics that I grew up reading. And I think what's so interesting to me is that nowadays I think it's become fashionable to bag on Marvel. Like, I don't understand, like, these TV shows that are really trying outlandish things between WandaVision and Loki, and then what Captain America and Winter Soldier tried to pull off, but they had a lot of problems. But they still, the things that they're doing are amazing.
Well,
and yet people complain.
Rob, I have a question, and it's something that I've been thinking about. I think you even brought up, planted a seed a couple weeks ago. Do you think that with the industry and the movies, that the fandom, you know, there's a core comic book, people who knew the comic books, went to Comic-Con, that whole culture.
I'm one of them.
Yeah. You know, when the Death of Superman came, I was the only kid in school that brought it, and like people were laughing at me, and I was the nerd, right? And that has this Marvel comics and all the comics have become such a pop culture. The casual fans are now outnumbering the people who grew up on this and know the lore and love everything about it.
The post-geek singularity has
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. But do you think that in some ways that's the toxicity of fandom? That like there's the people who want to just fight for the fandom and the purity of it, the message, and then there's these people who, whether it be comic book movies or it could be something totally different, whether it's politics, but they found themselves to have a fight. You know, there's something in them that they have to just be contrary or just say this is not enough or this is stupid and it's almost dumbed down, and that's why there's much infighting between fandoms.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some of that. I mean, the way I see it, what's happened with fandom is, like when I was growing up, I was an island of one. I didn't have anybody. I didn't have any, and I knew that my fandom was very much compartmentalized. Like I was a normal kid, very social. I partied, I had girlfriends and all that. But I didn't share I'm sitting at home in my room by myself, poring over the blueprints of the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah.
I didn't even want people to know I was doing that.
Okay.
And even though everyone knew I was, I was never called a nerd because I was very outgoing and gregarious and I had a social personality, but I was a deeply in a nerd. But it wasn't nerdy. Like I didn't see it as being nerdy. I thought of it as being like, for me, it never occurred to me that my deep interest in science fiction, fantasy, and horror was nerdy because it informed, like when I watched Star Trek, the idea of boldly going, I'm like, yeah, man, I want to be able to travel to, like I might not be able to go to a foreign country, a foreign planet or an alien planet, but I want to be able to go to a foreign country and meet women and be able to walk up to them and be like, hi, how are you? You know, lay down the Captain Kirk, and that to me was what Star Trek was all about. It was like boldly going. Like to me, nerd culture was it was heroes and it was people to emulate, and it was I did not get into nerd culture because the rest of my life was boring. I already was in nerd culture, and I wanted to live an exciting life. And it was interesting. It was only later that I discovered that a lot of nerd culture existed because people were escaping from their lives that they didn't like. And my whole thing, my disconnect was like, I'm having a great fucking time. Like, but I love comic books and Star Trek. So it was an interesting way to go. So I've never had the idea of it. Like I was always, I'm like, hey, bring it on. Let me show you this movie, or you want to borrow this comic book? Check this out. I didn't care if people liked it or not. I was just trying to share with people what I thought was awesome. But a lot of fandom, which I saw like starting in the early 80s, there were people that it was their thing. You know, for me, fandom was not my thing. It was not something I belonged to because I wanted to belong somewhere. It was something that was just a part of me in general, but I met a lot of people where their fandom was how they defined themselves. And they took it very seriously, and rightfully so, because they invested a lot of their time and imagination into it. And what happened was, as we have watched nerd culture go mainstream over the last 30 years, and like you go to Comic-Con now, I don't care what anyone says. The first time I went to Comic-Con in 1988, it was a bunch of dudes in a room rifling through long boxes of comics. That's what it was. There was no hot girls cosplaying. I don't recognize any girl at all. I mean, I found a Japanese laserdisc of Akira, and this is the summer of '88. I'm like, oh my god, you know, it was everything nerdy you could possibly imagine. Now you go to Comic-Con, it's for everyone. It's for everyone, right, because the culture has become nerdy. The post-geek singularity occurred. People grew up. There is no one now who is not a nerd. There's just varying degrees of nerddom. And you know, I consider myself now an elder statesman of to me, ground zero was Star Wars. The modern era of nerddom was introduced with Star Wars. There were Tolkien fans before that, and Edgar Rice Burroughs fans, and everyone that went to Worldcon and read Heinlein and Asimov and Clark and Frank Herbert and all that. I get that. But the media began, the big blitz began in 77 with Star Wars, and it continued on. And watching the comic book industry and gaming, comics like Neil Gaiman's Sandman and Death, and then girls watching anime in the early 90s and becoming gamers, brought females en masse into fandom, and which is a great thing. And so during the 90s and the aughts, we saw fandom completely change. It went mainstream, and there's a lot of people that it was something that they held on to because that's what made them unique. Their identity was wrapped up in that fandom. And when it went, the idea of like, I didn't care I understood that there are going to be people that are casual fans. You can't expect somebody who might like Dune to have memorized everything of Frank Herbert's 6 Dune novels. You can't, because people aren't like that. They can't, like, as a Star Trek fanatic, I can't expect everyone to know what I know about Star Trek. But if they like Star Trek in general terms, I know that they're a person I can get along with. But I'm not going to expect anyone to know planetary names or the names of starships or episode titles or anything like that. And that's okay. You can like Star Trek and not know those things. And that doesn't mean you're not a dyed-in-the-wool Star Trek fan. No, my fandom is anomalous now. So everybody else, if you're a fan of something and you like something, hey, I'm not going to tell you if you're a true fan or not. And I think that's where we're at. We had this hardcore fandom where everybody's very protective because their personal identities were very much wrapped up in it. And now what's happened is we were still the odd men out. Or the odd women out. We were the geeks. We were the nerds. And now with fandom going mainstream, the captain of the football team is also an MCU fan. Yeah. And now you've got people going, well, fuck that guy. He doesn't know anything about Simonson's run on Thor. It doesn't matter. If he likes Thor and likes Captain America and likes the MCU, he's a fan. Just because he's captain of the football team and has already had sex with more girls than you've ever dreamt of having sex with doesn't mean he's not a fan. And don't hate him for that. Don't hate him for who he is. Celebrate the fact that, wow, the captain of the football team can't wait to see Black Widow. And that's where we're at. And I think part of the problem with fandom, and now there's an extra added wrinkle in that the creators of new material, what's so frustrating when you look at Star Wars or Star Trek, you're like, there's so much information out there that a cursory Google search would help you make what you've served us up shit. And we're wandering around bewildered going, wait a minute. We've come up with better storylines than the entire sequel trilogy drunk at a bar with our friends on a holiday weekend. And why are these people that are making millions of dollars giving us such substandard bullshit that if any one of us could have said, we can make this better for you if you talk to us for 45 minutes at a Denny's. Yeah. And we wonder, why is this? And these are people that are supposed to be professionals, but it's because these people are not they don't know. And Kevin Feige's and his crew is a bunch of fucking nerds. They're real nerds, and if they don't know, they hire nerds, and they're not afraid to fly their freak flag. It's like, you want the Guardians of the Galaxy? Fuck yeah. You want the Time Variance Authority? God damn it, we'll give it to you. No one else, no other franchise custodian is doing that because the people they hire don't know shit. They don't know shit. I'm hoping for Stubble McShave's sake that the people working on Wheel of Time, because it seems like they're really, really Wheel of Time geeks, and that's what it needs. And I think that the core of fandom now, the frustration, the fandom menace, the anger, is we're all sitting around, we want to be consumers of this stuff. We already love it. We want to love what you're doing. We want to love it. So why are you failing in such a spectacular, monumental fashion? Why is Benedict Cumberbatch Khan Noonien Singh? Why? Why are you replaying the end of Star Trek II that you have not earned? You're spending $200 million on this movie, and you serve up this garbage? And I think we ask ourselves, why is that? I think that's what's problematic now about fandom, is that we're running around going, we're really being sold this substandard product, but we want to buy it. We want to buy your product. We want to love it. I want the action figures. I want the soundtrack album. I want the movie poster. But when we get shitty material, who wants any of that? I don't know. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think that the bar has been raised like a lot, and I think that some people who work, they don't really take this as seriously as maybe you should these days.
I agree.
But you make a lot of good points.
Yeah, and you brought up Kevin Feige and being a fan and a custodian, because there's obviously, with Edgar Wright, he wanted to go one way with Ant-Man, and Feige was like, no, this is what I have planned. We need to stay the course because this is, and that's kind of a nerd move. So like, this is the plan. This is the blueprint. Maybe we'll work with you some other time, but
yeah. And I have to say, I have to say, in Edgar Wright's case, look, I really think he's a dynamic filmmaker. He's completely a geek. I liked his TV series Spaced, all the way back in the late 90s, early aughts. And I think he's got one of the more unique voices in cinema. I haven't loved everything he's done. Like, I'm not a fan of Scott Pilgrim. A lot of people are. I'm not. But, I mean, Baby Driver, I can't wait to see One Night in Soho. I love the Cornetto trilogy. I'm a big fan of his, and I think he's got one of the more unique voices, and he's a terrific, terrific director. And I'm kind of glad that we're going to get more original material from him rather than having him jump into franchise filmmaking. I think the world's a better place because we have Baby Driver, and I'm sure it's going to be a better place because we're getting One Night in Soho.
Right. Yeah. Kind of going back to the whole fandom, though, do you think a disconnect has happened where reading comic books and, the sci-fi shows and all that, there was not only a desire for goodness, but a lot of the heroes had an emotional maturity that I think we would adapt to, and that kind of emotional maturity is not being presented in a certain way anymore. Because people who would just be angry but would have enough self-control not to do something that they wanted to do because they were doing something that they had to do.
100%. I was saying about like movies of the 70s, like the comics I was reading growing up, the comic renaissance of the 80s were written by very thoughtful, intelligent people that had lived life, and they I mean, I look at what's happened to modern comic books, and I appreciate the idea that we all want to fight for the downtrodden and people that don't have representation and all that. But that doesn't mean you're writing a good story. And I think that one of the problems that we're having now, and we're seeing it all over the place, we're seeing it in movies, we're seeing it in television, we're seeing it in comics, is that the people that are writing this material they're not well versed in storytelling. First of all, they don't have. If you're writing comics or science fiction or movies, any kind of, you need to know the classics. You need to go back, and now we've got movements that want to decanonize the great classics of Western literature. Oh, that William Shakespeare, what did he have to offer the world? Like, give me a break. I mean, that kind of thinking, and you're gonna say what? We're gonna now listen to modern writers? Like, there's a reason why his writings transcend the centuries, and I think that there's this thinking, this weird thinking that, there's been just an enormous history of oppression over the last 2,000 years. Let's get rid of... Like, first of all, for all the oppression that happened, there's been some amazing advances. Humanity is where it is today because of our history. And this idea that we're gonna recontextualize all of human history as something that is bad. You're all colonial, horrible abusers. I'm like, give me a break. It's like you have the ability to even say those kinds of things because of our past. And I think that look, you know what? There's a reason why Shakespeare is one of the great playwrights of all time and why his stories endure. And you need to study those stories. And I would dare say I go back to the Bible. Whether you believe in the Old and New Testament, whether you walk with the Lord or not, if you are a fan of literature, if you're a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of storytelling, know your Bible. Because biblical stories are literally the basis. Like, I love the story of Job. I would love to see somebody do maybe one day I'll do the definitive, one of my things I'd like to do is the definitive Job movie, and do it like in the modern day and do a riff on it. But I'd love to do a Job film, because that story is classic. And there's so many, sometimes Bible stories are 2 or 3 pages long, and you realize, oh my God, I've been reading variations on this story for the last 2,000 years. And now there are people that be like, I'm not, that's, the Judeo-Christian, I'm not a believer. What do I need to read? It doesn't matter whether you believe in the Bible or believe in Scripture or not. You can't deny that Scripture has been the basis of Western civilization for 2,000 years. And you should know your Bible, or at least know the key stories and understand how they informed Shakespeare and understand how they informed other writers. And yet, nowadays, we don't have that. And I think part of it is our educational system. Now in our educational system, rather than be like, okay, we're going to learn about the history of humanity, we're like, well, I don't have to learn about that guy. That's just some white cis male. What does he have to say to me? And I'm like, look, man, you guys gotta stop thinking about yourselves and the modern age, and you have to start thinking about our history, where we came from, where we went, who did. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a rant, but it's we need to understand it's like, I don't understand anyone who tries to write modern science fiction without understanding science fiction is a literary genre. If you haven't read a number of the canonical works of the last 100 years of science fiction, how do you expect to write good science fiction? I don't know. Because you watched Arrival, and Blade Runner 2049, is that your science fiction now? Not that those aren't good movies, because I think they are, but you got to understand where all that stuff is coming from.
Well, do you think it's going to take some filmmakers to finally go, I'm not going to create what the people want. I got to create what's living in me and get this out, my frustrations or my creativity or my ideology, that at least will connect with some people. But
I think that's what they should do. I think that there's a lot of pressure, like right now, for a lot of people who like movies or games or books, whatever. Like, they have to check the right boxes, or else people will just ostracize them. So, but I don't think that, like, if you have a diverse cast or whatever, it doesn't make or break the movie. Like, it doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be good. It's just, people get too invested in that, and it's not necessarily that which has to do with, like, the actual storytelling. That's my opinion.
No, I mean, I agree. Like, for instance, like, okay, if you're going to adapt, we've talked about Lord of the Rings. So J.R.R. Tolkien existed at a certain particular point in history in a certain region that had a certain makeup of people that informed what he was doing. But he was drawing from, like, the Ring of the Nibelung. He was drawing from all kinds of things, but he was telling a very specific story about a very specific region of the world. And Middle Earth was basically proxy for London or England of his era. And he hated what industrialization was doing to the country. And so if you're going to adapt Tolkien, you have to understand that you're adapting his point of view from his particular time and place and all of that. So by transposing, there's a YouTuber named Just Some Guy. And he did a great video about this Tolkien presentation about leftist, I say leftist, but let's call it woke, even though people hate me to say that, but all this ideology that people are now trying to transpose on Tolkien. What I don't understand is, why is it okay to suddenly want to change and say, well, Professor Tolkien didn't have enough diversity? Well, yeah, because he was doing something about a specific area, a specific part of time, a specific part of the world. his viewpoint was from a very specific place. Well, that viewpoint is valid for him. And all these people that want to be recognized, what they're doing is they're turning around and they're invalidating people that they don't like or people that existed in the past. And they're saying, well, those people have no place. Well, they're not supposed to have a place in the modern age because the world's moved on. But you can't then go change their work to make it fit more with your modern agenda, because that's you're now not living up to your obligation to delve into what they were doing at the time. And it's very odd to me that we want to change all of these classic stories. When you're talking about things like when people talk about like racism, and I read this, just some guy did this video about this new Tolkien symposium and everything they're going to discuss, and I was reading it going, you guys missed the point. You're trying to turn something that was written in the last century into what you want it to be right now. But why not celebrate what it is and was, and understand what it was for the time it was made? And why does it have to be the way you want it to be now? It's not from now. It wasn't made for now. And that's okay. We have new things that are being made. And so what you should be more interested in is, why did Professor Tolkien write this at this particular time? What was going on in the world? How did that inform his point of view? And use it as a history lesson. But now it's like, well, we have to have more diverse casting. No. That's a thing of today. That isn't what Professor Tolkien was doing. He was writing things that were based on Norse mythology and Scandinavia and English myths and all that. A very specific part of the world. And there's nothing wrong with that. And yet we're trying to make it wrong. Like, we want everything to fit for everybody. Everything we have to make has to check every single box to make everybody happy. And I'm like, that isn't the world. I grew up watching Asian cinema, and I grew up watching foreign cinema. I don't want Asian cinema to be more like Western cinema. The whole fun of it is that it's different. It's Asian. I love Asian cinema. I don't want Asian. I don't want to see a bunch of like Americans showing up in Asian movies. Because what, we have to be more diverse here in Korea. Like, I don't know. When I want to see a Korean movie with Koreans in it. I don't want to see diversity. I want to see Koreans. I want to see your point of view. Give me your point of view. And I just think that we're moving into this. And by the way, the rest of the world isn't doing it as much as we are. We're infecting the rest of the world, but I don't get it, man.
Well, do you think it's because people are afraid to share their point of view? Because, again, the rock and roll spirit is, I don't care what, you either fucking like this or you don't. But people are like, I don't want to offend anybody, because
I think it's very dangerous. I think we are squelching freedom of thought, and people are actually terrified to speak their own minds.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think a lot of people no longer have their own opinion. They've had their opinion instilled in them by Fox News, and I mean, that's such an easy target. But it's not just one side or the other; it's all sides, and we're being given talking points. And when I grew up and had conversations with my friends, everybody was very opinionated. Everybody was their own individual. When I talk to people now, especially fans, I know what articles they've read. Yeah. Like, their opinions were shaped by this Screen Rant thing, or they watched this YouTube video. Their opinions have been so shaped, not just fans, but everybody, by what we're reading, that very few of us have our own opinions anymore that have been derived from things that the distillation of everything we've learned on our own.
And they're also quick to dismiss a counterpoint. You go, hey, let me show you this. And like, no. Almost like the person or the article they're reading has already discredited them. So they go, don't even give 2 cents time listening or reading that article, because I'm going to show you why it's wrong, instead of taking it on their own and letting it digest on themselves.
Yeah.
I think that people have really high standards for like morality. Like, they have this, like, it has to be complete perfection, or else it's like evil. I think that's bad. Like
No,
you have to tolerate some sort of inconsistency. Like,
Hey,
I
can I
agree. Yeah, go ahead.
ask a question to Emil? Just
yep,
from where you're at, watching how the fandom is in the United States, are you kind
yeah.
of? What's your opinion of like all this infighting and people calling
I
from
mean,
where you're shooting?
I don't really understand all of it. Like, I try to understand it, but I just like I got like I think that the biggest exposure I've had it has been like because I've been so inspired. Like, uh, I really like what they've done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I've become more interested in like comic book movies and like especially after like Batman Begins and all this like DC versus Marvel really got to me at some point. Like I didn't understand because it seemed like different genres to me, so I didn't understand why people were comparing them.
Mm,
Uh, but I mean, I don't really think about it too much.
okay.
Like I don't care that much to be honest. Yeah.
Well, no, I look, it's a very weird thing. Like, what I find really interesting is that for me personally, like I've met a lot of people online that I like. I really like the guys over at Midnight's Edge, whether it's Andre and Tom and I've met people like Polly from Latino Slant, and I've done some
Right.
great, like, I love those guys. And there are people that are saying to me, well, Rob, they do toxic whatever, and I'm like, actually, I was watching Midnight's Edge videos before I knew them, and I'm like, look, you know, you don't have to take everything as gospel. You watch a lot of things and make up your own mind. I mean, they're presenting their point of view, and they've done, I think, a lot of great work. And the things that we've done together, like the Blood In, Blood Out, or recently the Stand and Deliver thing, I find it so interesting that there's so many people that come after me for associating with other people online that they disagree with. And my whole thing is this: I'm like, I'm not gonna. I don't have a tribe, and
Yeah.
and if I like, look, someone like Ethan Van Sciver, who I have streamed with a couple of times, he's a very controversial figure. I admire what he did with something like Cyberfrog and creating his own. There's a lot of people that be like, you should never talk to him. And I'm like, but why? At the end of the day, he's been a comic creator. I own some of Ethan Van Sciver's work. And you might not agree with him, and I might not agree with him, but I certainly respect him as a professional and somebody who's been able to do things within the industry, the comic industry, and create his own destiny. But I mean, so he has a point of view you don't agree with. It's not like he's out firebombing buildings. And I think it's such a strange world that we live in where everybody's like, and look, there's people that hate me. And I get it. There's people that think I'm a monumental douche. I've been told by people I thought were part of this community to literally fuck off on social media. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. I tried to build a place where we could come and all hang out. But if you, and then of course, then I'm put in a position where I'm like, well, if somebody tells me to fuck off, I guess I have to block them.
Yeah.
Because you're left with no choice. I mean, somebody does that publicly, I'm like, okay, I'm done with you.
Yeah.
What
Which
can you do?
I think it's baffling, especially, if even different ideologies or belief systems, because look, the Punisher and Spider-Man have teamed up before and they work together. Captain America and Tony Stark, Batman and Superman. Our comic books and this fandom have taught us sometimes when you work with somebody you don't agree with 100% is better than the person who's a pea in the pod with you.
Right.
Because they have different strengths that you, or look at the world in a different way that you probably don't even have any experience to. I mean, look at Superman and Batman, complete opposites. One with a loving family, and there's a great Tom King issue of Superman or Batman where I think they're about Batman's in explaining to Catwoman what makes Superman so different, but why he's the best of humanity is something that he secretly envies because he has these things that he's never experienced, and he has a goodness and he has a positiveness of life but then Clark's talking to Lois about, hey, there's things that are strengths of Bruce Wayne and Batman about why he's broken, and I feel sorry for him, but that also made him stronger in a way I could never really have that strength. And I think sometimes we just need to. I have a bunch of friends from all far left to far right, and I'm like, you put them in a room together, they might fight, but I can talk to them separately in different conversations.
I have to tell you, me too, but I never used to think of them as anything. They were just my friends, and they had different points of view. Now it's like, well, you're part of the far left, or you're part of the right wing, you're alt-right. What? I'm like, I never thought that way when I was growing up. I had people, I had friends that had wildly divergent points of view.
Yeah.
Oh, but now it's like, what tribe does this person belong to?
Yeah.
You know, let's go raid their village. It's just bizarre. I mean, that's why I'm a fan of the individual. Yeah. And everybody likes things in different ways. And for me, you know, a lot of people have asked me, it's been such a bizarre experience over the last 2.5 years to be on YouTube, because I genuinely like people, and I like points of view. And people still get mad at me or say, well, why did you stream with Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers? And that was like a year ago. And, you know, Jeremy reached out to me, and I was like, he was very nice. He's a father. We had a great conversation, and it's still, people are like, how could you talk to somebody like Jeremy? And I'm like, well, I would say to them, well, how could I not talk to Jeremy? Like, Look, do I have to, I'm not his keeper. He might say things that offend you or whatever, but the time we spent together, I thought was valuable and well spent. And he treated me with a lot of respect. More respect than a lot of other people that I've worked with for a much longer period of time have ever treated me with. And we had a great conversation, but there's still people that bring up, like, how could you go on his channel? I'm like, did you watch our interaction? Am I supposed to condone because I appear on someone else's channel? Do I condone their behavior? No. But you know what I do? I do try and say that Jeremy and I are fans. We are passionate about what we love. We are passionate. He's an imagination connoisseur. You know, he likes Star Wars. He wants it to be good. He likes video games. He wants them to be good too. I respect that. I want that. So why is it I can't have a conversation with him without somebody coming out to me going, well, you shouldn't because of what? I'm like, because what? We have common ground. We like the same things. Why shouldn't we have a conversation? I'm not necessarily condoning I don't know my friends. I don't know what they say all day long. Can you imagine? It's like we're being asked to police everyone we know for any perceived transgression. It's bizarre. It's strange. Like, I like all different kinds of people. Yeah. I don't want to be beholden to the fact that, look, if they said some fucked up things, or maybe they were convicted murderers or something, and I would be like, well, you know, that wasn't my experience of that person, but apparently I was wrong. You know, that's okay. But at the time, I judge people by how they treat me and the kind of interactions we have, and that's it. You know, and they show me who they are when I talk to them. I'm not going to go listen to hearsay or read articles or dig up whatever. I'm like, if I meet somebody and like them, I like them and I stand by it. You know, if they turn out to be a serial killer, I'm going to be like, well, I didn't see that coming. Apparently my judge of character was not as great as I thought it was. But, I mean, you know, what are you going to do? Norwegian Krypton, or Kryptonian. Norwegian Kryptonian says, why do I feel like Kevin Feige has a planned multiverse, while with the Warner Brothers DC, the multiverse is something that fell into their laps? Well, I think he's correct. What do you guys think?
Maybe it's like the zeitgeist. Like, it's like people have these ideas and they happen to be similar, and they come up with them at the same time. I don't know.
Well, I think Kevin Feige, if we remember, he was working with the tools he had. You know, the toys he had, he only had certain properties. So now that he has an influx of, you know, X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Spider-Man, he's like, okay, now I can do this, this, and this. And as far as for the DC universe, you know, the TV shows and the movies were kept purposely separated. So obviously there was a multiverse in that, because they said, no, this is over here and this is over here. Oh, and these other movies here, like from Tim Burton and Bryan Singer, these are different universes, so they don't mesh together. They're not the same universe. So
it
Yeah.
seems like a natural progression for both of them because like what was his name? Not Sujihara. Well, someone at
Hamada.
work. Yeah, he was like talking about how it was like natural now for them to sort of look at their properties as a multiverse because they want some, I guess, continuity, but they have like all of these different properties that they're not part of the same cinematic universe, but they want to like promote all of them, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And also, I think that it's like now that Sony is doing their movies, and we don't really know how much connection they have to Spider-Man, and I think that it's like those ideas come very natural when you have like different studios and different properties.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we live in a wonderful time. I really do. When the fact that we've got shows like both The Umbrella Academy and The Boys are being adapted, it's amazing.
And Invincible.
And Invincible as an animated show, it's unbelievable to me. And the Marvel streaming series, and the Harley Quinn show. I mean, the fact that it came out that the producers of Harley Quinn had a story about Batman going down on Harley Quinn, and that became news. And like I've been talking about all day, I'm like, wow. Like we live in a crazy, insane world, but I never thought I'd be reading that story in the news. But it's still, what it means is that all of this stuff is like in the 80s when you read that these creators would come on, whether it was Frank Miller on Daredevil or The Dark Knight Returns or Ronin, Alan Moore coming off of Swamp Thing does Watchmen and blows everyone away. John Byrne after Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was awesome in itself. All these creators, I feel that we're kind of there right now with all of this genre material. We're getting adaptations of this stuff, and we're also getting different kinds of things, and it's just, I mean, it's amazing what we're getting now because the culture, the geek culture, the post-geek singularity has grown up, and now a lot of them are making television, and they're very successful, powerful people, and it's cool to see. I mean,
you talk about
oh, go ahead, sorry.
People who are fans is Seth Rogen. Look what he's produced.
Oh my God.
And it's because he's a fan of this stuff and he knows the story. He's also like almost like the gatekeeper, probably, I'm assuming, being the showrunner, saying, hey, this is what we're going to focus on. Stick to these things. Don't try to chase rabbits or create something new. Stick to these points.
Yep. Aurora Uplinks sent in a super chat as a sticker. I think it might be. I love that. Aurora Uplinks. But yeah, and I think, look, that's why people ask me, like, Rob, why are you so happy all the time? Well, because we live, I'm getting an embarrassment of riches. As a fan, I've been a fan since I was 5 years old, man. And we are getting some amazing, amazing stuff right now. And I can't believe, across the board. I mean, we're getting a lot of garbage, too. But that was always the case. But we're also still getting a lot of amazing stuff. By the way, Darth Plato says some social justice warriors and woke folk are the way they are because they, like Antonio Gramsci, believe they are breaking the cultural hegemony of the Western world epitomized by the USA. This is why the USA is ground zero. Cancel culture replacement is par for the course. Yeah, Darth, I don't disagree with you. Here's my thing. 9/11. All you got was a bunch of motherfuckers that wanted to burn the country down. Let's destroy the. I'd stood atop the World Trade Center. One of the first things, I went to New York for the first time in 1990 with my sister, and we went up and we stood on the. I have pictures of myself on the roof, on the outside, the top of the World Trade Center. Those buildings were huge. They were monstrously large. And to me, they represented the science, the technology, the vision, everything the Western world represented. And then the planes, too. Technology, we can fly, another product of the 20th century. And when 9/11 happened, ushering in the 21st century, there was no ideology. There was no people who were standing there going, we did this. We're going to burn down. They're like, we're burning down Western civilization because we're going to replace it with this. No, they didn't say that. They just blew up the World Trade Center, killed a bunch of people, destroyed buildings that were created through the science and technology that, hey, by the way, some of it was algebra that was created in Arab countries. We're just going to blow it up. Let's just destroy the West. Now I feel that people that are even living in the West are like, let's take it all down. Like, really? Really? Yeah. Well, what have you done? What are you going to replace it with? You know, it's funny because all the people that are attacking Western civilization are products of Western civilization. Where would they be without it? And it's so weird to me that now everyone's like self-loathing, like this civilization's so terrible. Really? Is it? It's allowed you to develop a point of view that allows you to criticize it. What other country in the world, where would you like to go? North Korea, the Soviet Union. Hey, if the Taliban take over Afghanistan, I'm sure you're all going to want to move over there and live under that great rule of people that are really respectful of your thoughts and opinions and sexuality. And if you want to be non-binary, hey, by all means, let the Taliban tell you what you want. It's just, It's so weird to me that we have so many people that want to destroy Western civilization that are products of it. To me, that's the ultimate form of luxury. Wow, you live in such a lap of luxury that you can destroy the civilization that gave you life. Amazing.
Hey, Rob, I had a question based on that idea. Do you think I have an idea for what would be a great property that could be made into a show? But I'm curious if they would even make it because of how, with tensions between police relations. Savage Dragon.
I love Savage Dragon. As a matter of fact, I think I have the first 100 issues. And I think that's a great comic. I love that comic. And they did an animated Savage Dragon.
Yeah, but it was for kids mostly.
Yeah.
But what if they really kept to the adult nature?
I think Savage Dragon would be great.
Yeah.
I think people would love it. And live action, it would be awesome.
But
I'd love it.
Do you think with how people view the police right now that would be like, oh, we can't have this guy who's wants to be a cop, or do you think, oh, this is exactly what we need?
No, I think there, no doubt. I mean, the funny thing is that I worked on a medical lecture series, which I'm doing more of. I'm shooting more of it in August, and I worked in I'm going to Portland, Oregon, and I've worked with local PD and local SWAT, and I've met a lot of great people. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of great, dedicated law enforcement people, and we've made it sound like, let's get rid of the police. I'm sorry, that's not going to work out. That's not going to end well. It'll end in tears, I guarantee you. The idea that, look, the police, they're like teachers. They're asked to do so much for so many people. They're asked to be all things at all times. Do we need police reform? Absolutely.
Correct.
But to pillory our police forces and a lot of the great people that have busted their asses for their entire lives to protect and serve is silly. And the idea, our civilization is way too immature to get rid of the police. There's no fucking way. No way. I mean, look at just the last week in America. How much gun death have we had?
Right.
I mean, can you imagine if there were no police? It would be the purge every night. For real. And it's just, it's crazy. But I do think that Savage Dragon, look, I'm a fan of, I love stories about the police, whether it's stories about bad, corrupt cops or good cops, like Lethal Weapon. Would Lethal Weapon, let's say Lethal Weapon didn't exist, would it get made today? Would people be like, you can't make that movie? It shows these two super cops. It's a multi-ethnic team. It's a black guy and a crazy white dude, and they have respect for one another, and they're good at their jobs. You can't make this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, did you hear the story about the casting director, Richard Donner, wanted to make it an older white cop? and the casting director insisted for Danny Glover to read for Murtaugh.
I know, but I love that.
Yeah, and what's her? I think Marion Doherty. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah,
that was
her.
When I worked at Warner Brothers. Marion Doherty is one of the most legendary casting directors ever. When I worked at Warner Brothers, she was on staff. Her office was right down the hall from mine, and she was a legend.
Have you seen the documentary Casting By, which is basically she's the main focal point, but they talk about other casting.
Yeah, I have not. I need to see that.
It's amazing because just how she thought outside the box that everybody was thinking, and people just are sometimes so consumed of I got to get all this done. It's like, hey, I didn't even consider that.
She was amazing, and her assistant Trish. I can tell you actually a Hollywood personal story for me. So, Marion Doherty's assistant Trish that worked with her when I was at Warner Brothers. I used to say I was madly in love with Sherilyn Fenn when I worked. It was Two Moon Junction and Twin Peaks.
Okay,
we're talking 89, 90. And I used to say to Trish, I'm like, you got to bring Sherilyn Fenn in here, and when you do, just call me. I'll walk down the hall. So this went on for like 6 months, and so one day, Trish calls me up and she goes, "Hey, Robert, you should come down to the office." And I'm like, "No," and she goes, "Yes." So like I go down to the office, and there is Sherilyn Fenn. By the way, much shorter than I would have thought, but looking as beautiful as ever. And I walk down. I'm like, and I'm trying to be cool. This is so funny. I'm like, "Hey, how are you? My name is Rob Burnett." And I figured because I already work in feature production. I work in the executive building at Warner Brothers, so I'm just like, "Hey, how's it going?" And she says, "Well, Marion and Trish say you're a big fan of mine." And I said, "Well, I really liked you in Just One of the Guys." And I wasn't going to say I loved you in Naked in Two Moon Junction. I didn't say that, but so we have a really great conversation. She goes, "Why don't you walk me to my car?" So I do, and we walk through the executive building. We go out to where her car is parked. She's got a parking space, and we actually linger. I talked to her about for like a half an hour.
Wow.
And she goes, "Listen, it's great to meet you, and maybe if I come back and I'll see you again or something." And I didn't say shit. I was just trying to be cool. I'm like, "Cool," and I leave, and then I go back down to Marion's office, and Trish is there. And she has an 8x10 of Sherilyn Fenn that's signed to me, which I still have. It says, "To Robert." And I'm like, I'm trying to be like the coolest, most awesome dude ever, and you got her to sign me a fucking autograph? I was like, you just any game. Like, I was bringing my A game, and you had already destroyed it by asking her to sign me an 8x10. I was like, oh my God. Obviously, I never talked to her ever again, but it was just, I'm like, cock blocked by Marion Doherty's assistant. It was terrible, but man,
that's a great story.
I couldn't believe she's like, what? I work at Warner Brothers. I'm not going to get an actor's autograph. Come on, man.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like 23 years old. But I can't get mad. Trish was awesome.
Yeah.
And Marion Doherty's like, I'm not going to say anything. But still, I was like, God damn it. I was trying to be so cool. And then she knew the whole time she'd signed an 8x10 for me. My biggest fan. Oh, terrible. Terrible. You know what? I tell this story. I'm in pain. I'm in pain telling it.
But just so you know, your pain brings us joy.
Well, yeah, there's and I still have that 8x10 somewhere. It's in the Robservatory somewhere. I got to find it and put it up because it's hilarious. It's hilarious. And, it's also a cautionary tale. I'm like, man, but it was, I understand. It was a running joke with us for like 6 months, and then she made it happen. So that's my Sherilyn Fenn story. That's the only time I ever met her. I after that I would have hung. Now she would. 5 minutes after we met, she'd forget about it. But it's been 31 years, so I'm sure the statute of limitations is over on being a douche. Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, speaking of cautionary tales, and that's one of the things that going back to why I love New Order, I think it is a cautionary tale saying, and do you think storytelling has lost? Like, when's the last time we saw something that goes, oh yeah, crap, this is the direction we could head? Whether it's TV show, movie, could you guys think of anything that made you just go, oh, I need to reevaluate some things in my life? Or
What about you, Emil? That's a good question.
I can't come up with anything really. I mean, like I've had a lot of shows and movies that have affected me a lot, like, but I haven't really like they haven't been realistic or anything like that. I mean, I've watched documentaries that have like literally changed my life, but like movies and TV shows, I can't come up with anything right now that like makes me contemplate how the world is going. Maybe like what do you call, like Armageddon movies? No, but like when the world is ending because of climate change and stuff like that. I hate those movies, but they make me think a bit more about that. It makes me a bit scared.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. Well, listen, gentlemen, I'm going to shuffle you off because I need to end this show. I'm going to see if I can get some more people to come on for the last couple of minutes. Not couple of minutes, but a little bit. I want to thank you for both being here. Sonny, this has been great. Emil, it's always good to see you. What a great conversation we've had. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
For sure. Can I recommend two things to you?
Hell yeah, you can.
One's a website for T-shirts, because I know you're a T-shirt aficionado.
Oh, yes.
Dayoftheshirt.com. Have you heard of that?
You know what? Somebody sent me a link, and I went there. It's got some great stuff on it.
Yeah, and they change it every day because it's from all those people who make those amalgams of shirts.
Yeah.
They're great. And then number two, speaking of rock bands, and I know you had that professor from in Texas who was asking about. There's a rock band called Rival Sons. They're based out of Long Beach, California. They're incredible.
I really liked her. I hope I want to see her again. I mean, it's kind of weird. I'm like, I can't really say that. Elizabeth wouldn't appreciate it, but I mean, I want to see her again on this show. I really enjoyed the conversation we had. So
she definitely brought an interesting perspective and just things that, again, like we don't think about.
No, and I thought that was a great show too. That's what I love about the show. Well, gentlemen, I will see you both later. Thank you for coming on the show. I very much appreciate it. Definitely. And I can't wait to see you again. And I know, Emil, I'll see you. And Sonny, I'm sure I'll see you soon, too.
All right.
I need to come. I should come down to Burbank. We should hang out.
For sure.
When I used to do John Campy's show at his house, I always went to the Wood Ranch Barbecue, and I'd walk down from his house and go sit there and drink wine and have barbecue chicken. Is it even still there? Do you know?
It is.
Is it open?
I believe so.
Yeah. Hang on. I did go to Atomic Records. Yeah.
Okay. Because you like physical media, I just figured.
I love it.
Yeah.
Loved it. Well, gentlemen, I will see you both soon, and thank you for being on The Midnighter. Wow, it's good to have you both here. And I want to say, hey, I will allow one more. If anybody wants to come on. Does anyone want to come on? You don't have to. But if you do, here's a link. We'll bring the show to an end. Paulus Plain sends in a super chat, very astute, says the Middle-earth saga is J.R.R. Tolkien's lament to the invasions of Britain and loss of its mythology. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And that's why you need to ultimately, if you're going to adapt him, have to respect that was his intent. And when you say, like, well, the world's moved on, sure, but his work is still his work. And I think it's important that you recognize that that's where it is that it comes from. I think it's important. And I don't think it slights anyone. I mean, that what Professor Tolkien was doing, his world was diverse. It's just we weren't following a story it was a very specific story. So No, you know. Well, look, I don't see anyone coming on, so I think that I will bring an end to this episode of The Midnighter. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies, I want to thank you for being here. I will be on the John Campea Show tomorrow. We are doing Fully Articulated at noon with Az and hopefully Justin. Then Robservations will turn back on in the afternoon. And then I'll be here tomorrow night. So I hope to see you. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via Super Chats and Tips. Thank you so much. And also, I want to thank my moderating staff. I think Bunyan Snipe is here. Thank you for being here, and thank you for moderating. And I love my moderating staff, especially people from the UK. So thank you for that, Bunyan Snipe. Very, very much appreciated. And if you want to send me a letter to the Robservations Midnighter, please do so at the Burnettwork.net. And with that, I will end episode 16 of the Midnighter, or just Midnighter. And I want to thank you all for being here. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to everyone, have a better day. And of course, as you know, I mean that.